Now the story of a World Wide Web that connected everything, and the one YouTuber who had no choice but to keep it all apart. It's spoiler, I hardly. Spoiler warning for everything that has come out in House of the Dragon so far, so that's the first 2 seasons and the half season that we now have out. I have not read Fire and Blood, the book that House of the Dragon is based on. I should put in a spoiler warning for season 1 of Game of Thrones in the first book that, oh yeah, by the way, Renly and Loras are really obviously. I was busy enough, it took me a few days after this newest episode released for me to get into it. I loved it like the last 2. I just want to hop into checking in on the bingo and then talking about what it all means and speculation for the future, because I am really excited to share my theory, which will, the problem being, because I haven't read Fire and Blood, it will either sound like, if I am correct, like I am just lying that I haven't read Fire and Blood, because I will just be saying what has happened, or more likely my theory will be completely wrong and people who have read Fire and Blood will be like, what are you talking about? Bingo! House words. Don't think there were any new house words. Dead Targaryen and flashback/vision. No, we don't seem to be doing any of that this season. Valyrian dagger. We've avoided that, but we are getting into the last couple episodes. Wouldn't surprise me if it pops up again. Happy Pride Month, Westeros. This one's interesting. I'm not going to count it because I've generally been on the side of waiting for really explicit confirmation or appearance of things for this bingo. But I feel there is a heavy implication here that Gwaine is gay. Ormond says 2 things back to back, and I don't remember what the first one was, but it made me go, is he implying that? And then the second thing he said was to Daeron, saying, keep your back up against a wall around and be careful, something like that, which is like, whoa! And that seems like a sort of thing that Ormond, who is a guy who's clearly very messed up and also is talking to a literal Targaryen here, would say to him about his own uncle. I do think there's an implication here that you can't spell Gwaine Hightower without gay. It adds yet more nuance to a character who I think, when I made my big video about Game of Thrones Season 1 Episode 5, I talked for a couple minutes in there about how Renly is kind of a disappointment compared to book Renly, and Renly is also a character very connected to Loras, who's also gay. But those were cases where in the books you had written bold warriors with interesting personality characterizations, where Renly is he's an extremely casual guy come what may, and Loras still has this hoity-toity honorable knight about him, and in the show they just eradicate Renly's toughness and cunningness and all of that kind of stuff, and Loras gets to be a knight, but it doesn't quite hit the same, doesn't get the same depth of character, and they rob him of his phenomenal candle line, which he just drops to Jom out of nowhere and is an all-timer. This to me feels like a redemption for that with Gwaine we're getting to see what Loras could have been at his fullest potential in a TV show. That Gwaine is a character who starts out as annoying hoity-toity, but we do also see there is a core of honor there. The fact that I did not realize at the end of the last episode that he just walks away from the suicidal death wish. He does show some kind of growth there after a very interesting complex relationship with Kristen Cole, and now he's here to be the good uncle, but also interestingly that while he is the one guy who can stand up to Ormond and tell him off and not just get thrown out the window for it, he also seems to be in a reluctant position of, well, I don't really think there's anything I can do about him, he's too powerful, I should just go back to Old Town to be the heir. So I'm super curious to see what Gwaine does going forwards. And probably, I'm not very personally attached on a level of want a happy ending for them, for many of the characters in the show, but I would be happy with Gwaine getting a happy ending. Aemond LARPs as Daemon. At this stage, I'm still going to say no, but I'm sure he'll say something nuts in the next couple episodes that locks it in for me, because what do we get in episode 6? It's mainly just centered around his bond with Alice deepening, him deciding I need to get back on the road and be out there again, and them deciding to become this strange power couple for resurrecting old powers, essentially, which is all very interesting, but it's not particularly Daemon-y kind of stuff. Essos appears. No, we do keep getting closer to taking a cog to Braavos. I'm still not sure if the gang are actually going to end up doing that. regardless, so extremely fun seeing the three of them interact. Incredible comedy bit where Aegon asks Tyland, do you think I'm terrible? And we get absolute word salad. Beautiful. Dragons die. No, they're all fine. Westerosi history. No. Ship sink. No. The Kotsk reference. No. Kristen Cole acts like Jean/Anakin. So to my surprise, Kristen Cole is now dead and out of the show. He gets no more chances, and I don't think this season he did anything that was particularly Jean or Anakin-y. The best chance to tick it off was the last episode where, as I discussed, there is something of Jean in their mutual kind of acceptance of, if I die gloriously in battle, I'm okay with that, but they reach that conclusion in many ways from very different approaches to get there. I could really be talked into it. Maybe I'll have to do a review at the end of the season, but as it stands, I'd rather not feel like I cheaped my way into bingo, especially given that I didn't even notice until now, but looking at the bingo, like, if we get the Valyrian dagger, that's it. I've crossed off a line. I'm counting that. Laris is on fire. Laris is fun as always, but nothing in particular. Sweet Home Valyria, we have another case of it. We have another uncle-niece relationship. Didn't see that coming. Makes some sense for Baylor-ish. I mean, it's a pretty sudden rebound. Doesn't make too much sense for Alan, but I think that's because we've lacked so much of a sense of interiority for him, and now we're just kind of playing catch-up, so okay, I guess. Dragon does something suicidal. No, they've been chill. Avengers Endgame, North, Ironborn, Dornish do things. If I hadn't counted already, I definitely would have to for everyone teaming up around Kristen Cole, which incidentally, like, the trap got me. It was a good shock when all those people sprung off the ground. But number one, it feels like it'd be really hard to hide that hundreds of people are all breathing and alive in a field at the same time for long enough for the trap to work. And number two, they all die. Like, I just don't think the trap is worth it at all. I don't think there's a situation where if you all show up out of the woods nearby and Kristen Cole's army is like a 2-minute run away from you, that they can go, okay, we're just gonna run and we're gonna be completely fine. Like, they're absolutely bedraggled and exhausted and out of supplies and all of that kind of stuff. There's just no scenario where they're making it out alive. I'd much rather, not sacrifice all those guys for that trap. Otto, hits roll, cat. We've dealt with all that, though I'm sad that we're not seeing more cats around. Backstabbed. I feel like we're fast hurtling towards a lot of betrayals in quick succession, but there's nothing in particular in this episode that struck me as backstabby. Another low-key episode for Orwell. A is definitely not gone. At this point, I'm not confident that anyone's getting a piece for retirement. I think in particular, as an episode I really, really liked, I think there were a couple really stupid things, and one of the two really stupid things is the entire plan of, oh, let's just send Alicent away to bait an Aemond, which has to me so many things wrong with it. It's like, okay, what if Alicent manages to go rogue and become another, final stand for the Greens? I don't think she will, but like, Rhaenyra's paranoid, What if she gets killed out there and then that becomes a cause celebre for the Greens? What if Aemond can just take out a few guys because his dragon comes back or whatever, and now you've just lost both of them for no return? What if Helena reacts badly to all of... Like, I just really don't see what the problem is with just continuing to hunt Aemond on foot. His dragon's already unleashed and launching random attacks anyway. It's not like it can really get any worse. I suppose the worst... I guess I just wish they better articulated the urgency of it in the episode, because I suppose the worst is Aemond recovers his dragon and then takes that dragon down to Tumbleton. I'll get back to the other stupid thing in a sec, but just rounding out the bingo, we've already dealt with Night and Full Player Overboard. Yes, they've communicated again, and we still have no funerals or weddings. There's no way I'm getting to cross that off. At this juncture, what am I looking at as my best hopes for bingo? We can't do the middle row because, like, I haven't, decided on the Kristen Cole thing. Backstabbed and Grandmaster Orwell conspires could very quickly come together as a row. All I need is a Valyrian dagger, obviously. Other than that, I think those are my only few chances. Hopping over to thoughts on the episode. The other thing that I think was really stupid was that Alan gets a cool moment where he's talking with Corlys and he gets to be like, okay, you're mad with the Queen for not recognizing me. I was mad with you forever for not recognizing me. Which is like, yes, they're having the same conversation again for the 10th time, but that still works as like an important emotional line in the conversation, well performed. And then what does Corlys come back with? He says, tell her that the pirates have said that Tywin Lannister has returned, which is like, oh, what? What? It's so unnatural. It's completely deprives us of any chance to have an emotional conversation here between them, which is especially galling because, as I'll get to later, Corlys is probably dead at the end of this episode, and if he's not, then like they're not going to have the chance to speak anytime soon. We've lost that avenue, and instead the information being communicated is like maybe somehow a pirate recognized Tywin Lannister and then was like whatever, we can handwave how the information gets through there. I just don't think it's the most logical. But then Corlys like picks this up and is like, okay, I really need to communicate this through now to Alan, even though I'm super angry with the Queen, which is maybe supposed to symbolize Alan has browbeaten him into also doing his duty for the Queen. But like, what is the follow-up here about Tywin Lannister? We don't get anything on that this episode. It just feels like it's out of nowhere in their conversation. And then if you think about the ways in which Tywin could be important in the story, like going after the guy who knows where all the gold is, like it's just shunted to the side. So I really don't like that line, along with not liking the Alicent plan. I would much rather have seen her and Helena contained in King's Landing and a different plan to deal with Aemond, because I like a lot of these Alicent-Helena conversations in the confines of King's Landing. I'm going to say one more thing on Helena, and then I'm going to check through the episode for anything else I've missed, and then I'm going to get to my big theory that I'm really excited to share. The Helena thing that I really enjoyed was when you see her embroidering, and it turns out that she is embroidering in the style of the intros for the show in seasons 2 and 3. I think that's such a cool detail, and I think it's just one of those cases where you can do something meta which never has to be made plot relevant in any way, although it is cool in that case that it literally does become plot relevant because it's finally someone is acknowledging and acting on Helena has these important visions and here's how we can use that intel. Just in the meta way where it doesn't have to be plot relevant, it's just really cool to go into every single episode now thinking, oh, that intro that I'm watching, that's just not just like something disconnected that's just aesthetic cool animation. This is what Helena is embroidering. This enriches this character because I'm picturing her weaving together all these things that when I was talking to a friend about this craft stuff, she pointed out that that's particularly almost horrifying from the perspective of if you're embroidering something where you don't even know what exactly it is that you're embroidering, it's just this vague vision that you've had. It's a way in which the magic overcomes you and you just kind of fall into the flow state, and then you look down at what you finished embroidering, and it's, well, obviously so many of the scenes in the intro are terrifying or awful or have these tremendous impacts, and I feel like that really enriches and makes concrete so much of what is unsettled about Helena in a way that's just a really cool and unique way that I'm never going to see again, I don't expect, to utilize crafts in a narrative. Checking back through the episode now, 4 things I want to talk about from this episode that I enjoyed. Number 1, okay, yes, I'm not going to lie, I enjoyed seeing Criston Cole die. It's a natural ending for his plotline. It just happens to be in a bit of an awkward place, which I get. Once again, I think this all just goes back to like the real world HBO structural issues with season 2 and season 3, etc., etc. But if anyone's going to have a kind of stumbling towards a meaningless ending, yeah, it makes perfect sense for Criston Cole, and it's still worthwhile time for the story, not just for the themes of basically like taking the themes of A Feast for Crows and transplanting them into House of the Dragon about how war is meaningless and futile and da-di-da. It's still meaningful for the story because we've seen Gwaine Hightower, we've seen the impact that his relationship with Criston Cole has had on him, and now he's going to carry that forwards, and that's a lot of why I hope he has a really significant role going forwards and that he survives for a long time. It was pointed out to me that Criston goes down in essentially the exact same way in Jacaerys. They stage it the same way. I have no thoughts on why this is, but I look forward to hearing analysis from others on what the symbolism could be. Second thing to mention is I thought it was an interesting subversion that Hugh sneaks into Tumbleton to try to rescue Kat, who we've been so worried about for the past few episodes. And she's like, what's wrong with you? You left to become a dragon rider. A dragon rider might be in an immensely cooler and wealthier, more secure position than just, everyday member of the common folk. What was he? He was a smithy, was he? But I don't need a dragon rider. Me and my family just need you to be doing your job as a smithy, and you didn't. You weren't there not only to do your job, but to actually protect us. So however strong he's become, he's not looking after the people who matter to him, which is getting into, classic thematic, tragic stuff. I mean, to go elsewhere on the bingo, this is a key, part of Anakin Skywalker's story over in an entirely different narrative. And so I thought that was an interesting way for that scene to go. It does get a little bit ridiculous with, nobody stepping in when Hugh is being so threatening to someone who, lest we forget, just the other day, someone got badly punished for being threatening to, whatever. At least we didn't get one of those scenes this episode. Stepping aside from that, moving on, the assassination attempt on Daeron, that was all just really fun. That was cool to see how everything in that action scene is handled. No analysis to add on that, but final thing to say, before I get to my big theory, is I really like how Daeron and Gwaine chat, where there is a kind of mutual acceptance between them of Daeron's the puppet, Daeron does not want to rule. Again, this is stuff that if the show had more time, it'd be nice to see Daeron sort of struggling with this and gradually coming to this realization. But as it stands, it's a good way to distinguish this cause from the Aegon and Aemon causes that have come before it, and being like, okay, this is an ambition, this is an entitlement, this is something very different, where, if anything, those things belong to Ormond, and Daeron's just this poor kid who's caught in the middle between these different influences. We all know what Ormond is, that he's a monster, that in particular the fact that he seems to shun Otto as an inspiration is quite interesting, when I felt earlier in the season like he was following in Otto's footsteps. All intriguing. And that leads me nicely on to my theory, which concerns the final scene of the episode and some scenes before it. Ormond does note, if memory serves me right, that Corlys is a good hand of the king, which is interesting because from what we've seen, he hasn't particularly done much to be a good hand since Rhaenyra came to King's Landing, but that's not material at all to the point here to say. Boljon Roxton, whose name I only know because of YouTube videos, I know nothing about him. He's the guy with the beard who played Brasso in Andor, which is a very funny role shift to here, where he seems like a much more ominous kind of figure. He gets sent with a crack detachment to take down Corlys and his guys. Probably they killed Corlys, maybe they just knocked him out to, I don't know, take hostage or something. Why would they do that? Look, the surface level motivation we would get here is Ormond saying he's a good hand, so you take him out, right? Either you kill him to deprive Rhaenyra of his counsel, or you just put him in chains and bring him back and try to persuade him to be your hand. That is entirely plausible as an explanation. I want to offer a different explanation, particularly because, as we've seen, Boljon Roxton has to have some kind of narrative purpose. He's been hanging out in every single scene that Ormond is in. He has a presence in the room, and yet he's barely gotten to say anything. We're building mystique up around him. So the fact that Ormond is not only willing to risk sending him away, but specifically risk sending him when he just played a key part in saving Daeron's life from assassins, who you can expect to come again at some point. Why would you do that? Why would you engage in such a risk? Not only in sending him away, but sending him to somewhere distant from Tumbleton where dragons could swoop down on him. What I'm saying is this seems like an extraordinarily important mission because he has sent an important asset on such a high-risk mission, in a way that I think goes just beyond having a chance to deal with an individual player on the board. Now let's rewind a fair bit in the episode. In fact, let's hop back to the previous episode where we see that Ormond is receiving ravens from the capital. That could, or I think it's pigeons actually, whatever it is, that connects to the different plot that's going on about the assassinations, where there's all kinds of theories on who's doing that. Is it offended nobles? Is it have actual literal faceless men been hired? Is that what the title of the episode means? Or is it just a metaphor for, popular resistance? Who can say? But the point that I'm trying to get to here has nothing to do with those assassinations. The point is just Ormond receives news from what is going on in the capital. If something is widely circulated amongst the small folk in King's Landing, Ormond knows it. And when we talk about popular resistance in the capital, the example of that we get in this episode is all the small folk coming forwards and saying to Rhaenyra, please, things are calling into chaos, we've lost so many members of the City Watch, and Rhaenyra's checked out, she's, feeling like another Viserys, she looks up at the statue after she cuts herself, etc., etc. She hits one of the nuns with thoughts and prayers. It's not going well, obviously. A lot of the populace don't like her. That's obviously important for different plot lines, but that's not what I want to get to with this. What I want to get to is she reassures the public by telling them, I have sent for Velaryon soldiers, I never know how to pronounce it, Velaryon, to be brought into the capital to protect us. Now can you put together the chain of events? Rhaenyra tells the small folk of King's Landing, Velaryon soldiers will be coming in and they will be manning all the critical points of security because, as everybody knows, including as we've explicitly established Ormond knows, nothing else is keeping the peace in King's Landing. Security is poor, security is weak. The Targaryens might have the dragons, but on the ground level, they just don't have enough people to man the key posts that keep the city in their hands, that keep people safe. The second thing we know is that Ormond receives pigeons from the capital giving him news. Therefore, we know that Ormond receives the news that a detachment of Velaryons will be coming to take over all the key posts you need to control the capital. And the third thing that we know from this episode is that a crack detachment led by Bold John Roxton attack and eliminate those Velaryon soldiers before they can get to the capital. Once again, you could take that the easy surface level way and say, well, now the capital can continue to spiral out of control because Rhaenyra's reinforcements never arrive, but then she can cast around for some other ally who'll get her reinforcements. She can still prop up the city. That's not a killing blow, nor as a conqueror like Ormond, do I think you want to gamble at all on, okay, I'm going to throw King's Landing into chaos and then march in once, there's riots in the streets. I don't think that's particularly safe or stable. As we've just seen with Rhaenyra taking over, it's not enough to just swoop in because your opponents are weak. You need to actually have command and control and security. And that's my theory about this episode is I think Bold John Roxton and all the soldiers who have come with him are going to take all of the sigils and crests and tunics off of those Velaryon soldiers that they just murdered. They're going to chuck them on, throw away any of the ones that have too many stab wounds in them, clean out the blood. You can excuse some of it because they've just been fighting pirates, right? And he's going to march them right into the capital, which, after all, we literally just saw on this episode a group of soldiers showing up to one side's capital in King's Landing, the Baratheons, and then going to the other side's command capital, whatever you want to call it, at Tumbleton, and trying to eliminate the monarch. I think Ormond is just going to do the exact same thing back, but so much worse, because instead of sending a handful of Baratheons, he is going to send hundreds of his own soldiers into the capital to man all the key posts where there's no one else in place to stop them. And critically, because Rhaenyra already knows that Corlys has gone off in a huff and refuses to return, he never communicated his intentions to return to her. He may have wanted to. He did, that's what he says. She doesn't know that. So if hundreds of Velaryon soldiers show up with no Corlys, it doesn't look suspicious at all. It's just Rhaenyra being like, okay, well, he complied and sent the soldiers and he's still, throwing a hissy fit. Whatever. The important thing is I got my guards, put them all in position all over the city, and whatever happens from there, however Ormond sets up the rest of his war, because after all, at the very end of the episode, we also seem to get news that probably Ulf has defected to the Hightower side, to Ormond's side, to the Greens. However Ormond sets up the rest of his war, whenever he's ready to hit the capital, all of those hundreds of soldiers in the capital, they can start seizing and opening gates, they can murder key members of the leadership, leadership of the small council. They can attack Rhaenyra herself. They can abduct whoever they need to. I think this is it. I think this is the thing that has just convinced me. You know, through the season, it's obviously been a story of like Rhaenyra getting more paranoid and few good decisions being made and stability degrading in the capital. But I think this is a single moment where I just went, okay, that's it. I think this is cooked. I don't think Rhaenyra wins in the show because there is now this giant weakness in her security. And I think things are weak enough for the Black cause at this point that if they lose King's Landing, the only way they can come back into this war is just going blood and fire on everybody with the dragons, at which point it's like you're not even really winning, you're just making sure everyone loses, because you can't conquer and extract taxes and fealty from places where you've just killed everybody and destroyed all the buildings. I am so looking forward to the next episode to see if this theory is right. As always, if you think my theory is right, leave a like. If you think my theory is wrong, then you should also leave a like for how passionately I articulated it. Leave a comment with your own thoughts on what's coming up, and I'll see you in the next one.